Hey Jeff, we just kind of finished up a few videos where we've talked about, what's therapy and what's financial planning.
Yeah.
I think maybe one of the big questions that people might have is, why are these two guys from different professions,
Yeah.
sitting on the same couch talking about this?
Right.
I think we looked a little bit about, people who are struggling in their relationship, and they kind of think about that as an issue that they might need some counseling for.
Right.
So, talk a little bit deeper about, what can they expect and what can they not expect out of therapy when it comes to these financial issues.
I mean, the truth is that when people are going through the divorce process, one of the reasons they cite as contributing to divorce, a significant reason, is differences around money.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously a lot of couples have arguments about money, and when they go to therapy, one of the things they can expect is that the therapist will function as someone who facilitates conversation and helps them get to some resolution to arguments that they've been repeating over and over again. So, it's a really incredibly common phenomenon. In fact, almost all couples have repetitive arguments that never get resolved. That's totally okay.
Sorry, I'm laughing.
I know, it's a thing. It's a thing. We all know it, right? We all know it. But one of the functions that the therapist serves in situations like that is trying to understand more deeply, like to listen really, really closely, not only to what's being said, but to what's not being said. Mm-hmm. To read between the lines and try and figure out what's going on there between them, what's the interaction that creates the sticking points or the barriers that they have to overcome in order to get to some resolution on arguments like around money. So one of the jobs of the therapist is to make sure that those things that they're not quite aware of sort of come to the surface and they can begin to be discussed. Mm-hmm. If you can't identify what the problems are, or if you think the problem is a certain thing, but it's not that thing, then you're just perpetually stuck
Mm-hmm.
in that dilemma. And so therapists try to get at those underlying issues to help a couple have the freedom to choose something different in the future.
You mentioned that financial issues are kind of presented as one of the key determinants of divorce, or at least impacts on divorce. I know as a financial planner, I can't think of any other life event that, while as tragic as it is, if we can just put aside the emotional stress that divorce brings in relationships to individuals and to families, I can't think of anything that destroys resources faster or more permanently than divorce.
Yeah.
It is one of the biggest challenges to work with somebody on the back end of a divorce to try to figure out how to financially piece that life back together. And there will be ongoing consequences to that divorce for a long period of time. And I think that kind of gets to why you and I have known each other for well over 10 years. And it kind of gets to the issue of why we've gotten together through Relational Media to try to provide some help to couples who are struggling with how they communicate and how they specifically communicate about finances. In the financial planning field, there's lots of things that I can do to help people be efficient. There's a lot of things that we can do to help them achieve shared goals. But when relationship problems start developing, or when we realize that there is quite a bit of disagreement in a couple, that kind of provides some guardrails that I can't really push through.
Yeah, so they come into your office and you start talking about the money, and then they look at each other, or one looks at you thinking, oh my gosh, this is horrible, but there's no conversation,
or there's like a stone wall, or I can feel, you talked about repeating arguments. Mm-hmm. I can feel those triggers. Oh yeah, well this, yeah, here we go. I see those things when we start trying to get to the bottom of what it is that they're wanting to accomplish.
Right.
And that means that they're not on the same page. And so, there's kind of a place where I can't go. And you'd mentioned in one of our earlier videos that while there's some things in the relationship that you can handle, there's a place that you don't feel comfortable, or other therapists aren't really trained to go. And so what I'm talking about is this dead space.
Yeah.
This dead space that exists in the middle that, quite frankly, we've talked about this a ton together, is
Right.
that no one's really addressing how to deal with this or how to help people.
The
deal
dead
with it.
space being that I, as a therapist, don't have any training at all on how to help a couple figure out the actual planning, the concrete planning for their dollars. That's
Right.
your job.
Right.
But couples actually will come to me and ask, so what do we do? And of course, it's not my job to tell them what to do, right? It's my job to help them figure out how to resolve things together, not for me to resolve what they're going through. And you get the opposite dilemma, right? You get the dead space for you is they might be having a relational problem right in front of you, and you're not a therapist.
Right.
You can do the planning, so who's managing that middle space
Right.
between our professions? And I think the answer is no one, right?
No one, and up to
Until
this
now.
point. So what we've attempted to do is Jeff and I spent a lot of time working together trying to figure out what does this gap look like. And part of what it came to for me is looking at some of the young couples that would come in. They were just getting started in their marriage, and they're asking these wonderful questions like, so, what is it that makes couples financially successful? And thinking through those things, it's always going to be the couples that have a really strong sense of what it is they want to accomplish. And I started realizing that I've got people who've been married for 20, 30 years that have been very successful for the most part at getting the bills paid or saving money towards retirement and doing all of these kinds of things that we would in society look at and say, oh, that's really successful. But underneath those basic accomplishments, there's a lot of chaos. And there's a lot of don't go here and don't go there and don't talk about this. And you find that they're not really very happy. They're not on the same page.
Yeah, I see that in my work too. A wealthy couple will have been very successful in creating dollars, but they don't like each other. And I can't, if they're arguing about the dollars, I can't help them with the dollars. So I have to help them with other things, and that creates a kind of dead zone, like we were just talking about, that I can't solve with them. So I think our work together has been aimed at trying to figure out how to help people sort of get on the same page to identify the things they have in common, specifically the values they have in common, and then take those things as a way to use in decision making for future goals. And I mean that concretely. I think we mean that concretely, like future goals, what are you going to do with your dollars? But more importantly, I think infinitely more importantly, what are you going to do with your life? Dollars are just a resource, like any other resource, like time or love, whatever. What are we going to do with this resource? How does it serve the values we have in common? Not the opposite, which is a lot what I see. How many more dollars can I get?
So I think this idea of bringing together the financial planning field and the field of therapy, and trying to create this laboratory for couples, because each couple is going to have a very unique answer and a very different journey about how they put this together. I mean, if you think about going back to when you were dating, there were things that attracted you to your spouse and vice versa. And in a lot of ways, what we're doing is we're recreating a laboratory where a lot of those things are rediscovered, they're reconnected. You're creating new language around those things of where are we today and where is it that we want to go, and finding some common ground. And I've got couples that are in their 50s or 60s that are implementing some of these ideas and coming back and saying, man, I really wish we would have done this when we were 20 and 30. I wish we could have learned how to communicate about this.
And I wish I would have learned this when I was 20 or 30 too.
Yeah. So really what we're hoping to do is create this new space where you as a couple can go through and have this experience together and come out on the other end on the same page, come out on the other end realizing that you can go further together than you can just flat on your own.
Yeah, and that you would, although it's work, I mean, this is not like a simple thing where you just, go to the McDonald's drive up and, get the burger. It's not
Right.
simple like that. It's work, but you both enjoy it. There's something pleasurable about doing something together that's meaningful.
Absolutely.